All new tonight at 11, data shows domestic violence homicides in North Carolina are increasing, and there have been 24 domestic violence homicides reported so far this year.
That's up from 19 in the same time period just last year.
Domestic violence. It's a crime that knows no age.
I was young.
Or gender.
I would cover up the bruises.
Juliana Lozano is another survivor.
Your life could end.
She says the best revenge is getting out.
What was worse was like the sexual abuse, doing that by force. Ultimately, physical, scars can heal, but it's the internal scars that, live with you for a long time.
As they push for more resources, survivors like Juliana and Galen are stepping in to help. They're hoping their story has enough power to save a life and break a cycle.
There is help out there. You're not alone.
Don't be afraid to tell your truth.
And both of these survivors are very active in the community. Galen specializes in relationship coaching, and Juliana has a nonprofit that aims to help not only victims, but also Hispanic women who face many barriers getting the help they need.
Hello, my name is Galen J. Burnside. I am the CEO of Dope Attire to Inspire, LLC. Welcome to my project, Changing the Narrative, One Survivor at a Time. The intention of this project is to shine a light on domestic violence and to highlight that it affects individuals across all ethnicities and genders, not just the predominantly portrayed stereotype. Through this interview series, we aim to bring awareness to the diverse faces of domestic violence survivors and their unique experiences. Please be advised that the content of this interview might be triggering for some viewers as it deals with sensitive and potentially distressing topics. However, it is crucial that we share these stories to broaden understanding and support for all survivors. Thank you for joining us on this journey to change the narrative and amplify the voices that need to be heard. Question number 1. What's one of your favorite ways to relax and unwind after a long day?
So after a long day, after work, getting the kids to sleep, I like to take some time out for myself just to pray, meditate. So I will usually just sit in my back porch, or even if it's just laying down, watching a quick little series on Netflix. It's just something that I'm doing for myself so I can unwind after a long day.
Okay. Question 2. Do you have any hobbies or interests that you're passionate about?
So by trade, I'm a social worker. So my passion is really helping people. And I don't even look at it as like work because I'm so passionate about breaking certain generational traumas within our community. So I'm really passionate, and I do a lot of advocacy and awareness work in the community, and it's just something that it fulfills me. And so I just, I love doing that.
I love that, and that's good to give back. Last question. What's a fun fact about you that most people might not know?
So when I was 18, I moved to Hawaii. So not a lot of people, can say, hey, I used to live in Hawaii. So that's a pretty fun fact about me. I mean, I was actually fleeing the domestic violence relationship, but I did live in Hawaii for 4 months. So, it was pretty cool.
Awesome. Who is someone that inspires you and why?
My mom is someone who inspires me because she is someone who has gone through a lot, and she's very resilient. And, she came to this country when she was 19 years old, all alone, and went through many different things, and was able to, overcome and be a strong woman, and just show me that despite, the different obstacles that you may go through in life, your education is something that someone can't take away from you. And she just inspired me to, continue going to the top. And she, to me, is the definition of a strong, resilient woman. So I look up to her.
I love that. Shout out to Mom.
Shout out to my mama.
Yes. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go and why?
Well, there's so many different places around the world that I want to go because I love to travel. But if I had to pick one place, I would choose the Maldives island. I hope I'm saying that right. But it just looks so beautiful. I've seen pictures. It looks peaceful. I just want to go there for like a whole month and just relax and then just take in all the beauty of that beautiful island.
Okay.
Mhm.
Last and probably the most important question is, are you nervous to tell your story?
I am a little nervous. I thought I wouldn't be, but I actually am. It's been 11 years now since I left that relationship, but I do feel a little bit nervous because I just want to make sure that I capture everything, like the whole story and really be able to be a voice for other people who've been through some domestic violence. So, just a little bit nervous.
Hello, my name is Galen J. Burnside. I'm sitting here with Juliana Lozano. This is one interview of many to come in a series, shining light on domestic violence. With that being said, let's get right into it. Can you share your story with us? How did your relationship start, and at what point did you begin to notice signs of domestic violence?
So I was 17 years old when I got into this relationship. I was in 12th grade, and I'm from a small town called Gastonia, North Carolina, and I had a small group of friends. I went to a magnet high school, and I've always been all about like my education, being successful in school and, being able to achieve like a high level academically. So this guy that I met, he wasn't typically the guy that I usually dated. I would date more, people like that were going who academically were on the same path or like were athletes. And so this guy was very different. And when I say different, he would be considered like your stereotypical like bad guy. Like he was in the streets, drug dealer, high school dropout. But I didn't want to judge him for that, and I gave him an opportunity because I met him through a mutual friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started dating. He was very kind at the beginning and, would do little sweet things that I wasn't necessarily used to. I would say now, like after, going to therapy and all that, I had what you would call like daddy issues. And so I was just looking for love in all the wrong places. And so dating him, it was intriguing. It was something different. And I just got into this relationship and didn't realize I was in it until years later.
So at what point did you begin to notice signs of domestic violence?
So I started, for one, I didn't really know what domestic violence was. So even when the signs, and I'll share a story, like when I had a curfew and I had to be home by a certain time because it was school night. But I told him, I was like, look, we've been hanging out for a while, but I got to go home. It's getting late.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that I was even having to lie to my mom, telling her I was out studying. And when really I was with him. And so when I went to get out of the car, he grabbed me and he punched me in my face. And I was drawn back like, wow, did this really just happen? But at the same time, although it was something really bad that happened, I don't feel like I was able to really identify like this is what domestic violence was.
Mm-hmm.
Because, being in a, growing up like, this was kind of like my norm, just the toxicness that I didn't really realize like, oh, this is domestic violence.
So that brings me to my next question, which is, what were some of the first warning signs or red flags that you experienced in your relationship? I know you touched on some, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, so the isolation, isolating me from friends, obviously wanted to isolate me from family, wanting me to break the rules. There was a lot of pressure, like to meet certain needs that he had, controlling what I would wear. I recall a time that I wore a white shirt and he got really upset because he said that white is transparent, and he hosed me down with the water hose and like put mud all over me And that was very humiliating and made me walk around the neighborhood. And just to prove a point that I should never wear something like that unless he allows me to wear it. So these were a few of the signs. The verbal abuse as well, putting me down, making me feel humiliated, shameful, and really lowering my self-esteem, that I start to question, like, okay, well, maybe he's right. So those were some of the signs that I saw at the beginning.
Yes, thank you for that. So how did the abuse impact your daily life, your mental health, and your sense of self during that time frame?
It impacted my daily life heavily because, mind you, I was 12th grade, and I was going to go to, well, I did go to college at UNC Charlotte, and so it impacted me heavily because I'm trying to study or, prepare for an exam, and I remember it's times that he's like blowing me up multiple times, multiple times. Even if I did block, would try a different way to call me, and that's really stressful. I'm trying to study or prepare for an exam, and you're blowing me up. Like, even on my graduation day, he was upset because I was taking too long at the graduation.
Wow.
And this is supposed to be like a beautiful milestone moment, but he ruined it. Wow. He ruined that moment for me. And these were times that it was just like really stressful. And even at work, because I was working at that time in the medical field, and he would call my job, blowing me up, and I'm working. I can't always answer. And it's like that control of, you better answer when I'm calling you. Or you're taking too long to respond to my text messages. What are you doing? Now it's the accusations. Are you cheating me? Are you doing this? And so I never had that peace, because it's like constantly trying to prove someone that, you're not doing anything. And that took a toll on me a lot. And at work, it was hard for me to focus as well. And it was embarrassing because it was to the point where I had to buy scar and bruise cream to cover up those wounds, because it, like, going to work, I couldn't go to work like that. So I would have to wear like long sleeve. And that was really embarrassing.
What were the challenges you faced in recognizing and admitting to yourself that you were in an abusive relationship?
I would say that the challenges that I faced is that this for me was my norm. It's generational trauma that's passed on from grandmother, mother, things that they've experienced themselves. So being able to recognize these signs, it's my norm. What is domestic violence may not necessarily seem like domestic violence. It might not necessarily seem toxic because it's what I grew up, seeing. And so it was challenging, but when I got to college, I saw this documentary. Well, actually, it was when Rihanna did her documentary, and she was experiencing domestic violence. I was like, oh wow, like, she is going through this and she's sharing her story. Like, this sounds exactly like what I'm going through. So then when I was at UNC Charlotte, I was curious because there was a class on domestic violence, and I was like, I had just heard that documentary. Let me take this class. And so when I took the class, they were talking about domestic violence, the cycle of power and control. And that was an eye opener for me, because I was like, wow, I'm going through this and I really don't know what to do. And at that time is when I started to seek help.
That's wonderful. Shout out to UNC Charlotte for teaching a class about domestic violence. Yes. I think more colleges need to get on board with that. More schools need to get on board with that and teach classes about that, because it could be an eye opener for anyone that's either going through it, or even for people that are doing it and not realizing that that's what that is.
Right.
All right. Next question. Can you describe a specific incident that became the turning point for you, where you decided enough was enough?
Yes. So, they say it takes the people who are in these relationships many, many times before they leave. But my turning point was after I gave birth to my son. I had a child with him. And so after I gave birth to my son, it just hit me like, I wanted him to have a better life. I wanted to be able to break that cycle of abuse and trauma, and I did not want him to grow up seeing that. And so there was an incident where his father wanted to smoke. He's a smoker. But, I told him, like, we can't do that inside the house. Well, he cannot do that inside of the house or in the car because secondhand smoking. I didn't want that for my baby. And he didn't listen to what I was saying. He was like, I do what I want to do. And so I felt so powerless. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to call the police because I'm not accepting this for, my child to be around this. So I went to call the police. And he instantly grabbed me and he keyed my face with my car keys. And after that, he took me inside of the house and held me hostage for over 8 hours. So when I say hostage, he literally had me in a headlock on the couch. If I needed to use the bathroom, he's right there going with me. No access to my phone. And I felt so like powerless, like I couldn't do anything. But I remember I was praying and I was like, God, please, like help me get out of this because I want better for my child. And I had a plan. So as he held me down, I had a plan that next morning that he was leaving to work, I was gonna leave and never look back. And that's exactly what I did.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you were able to get out of that situation. That had to be incredibly scary to be held hostage like that. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I think now is probably a good time that we take a beat, let Juliana catch her breath, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
And we're back. I'm still here with Juliana Lozano. We're tackling some tough, difficult questions about domestic violence. And so now we're about to get back into it. All right, next question. What support systems or resources did you turn to when you decided to leave your abusive relationship?
So I did seek therapy. However, I did not have an empathetic therapist. And I also did not have what I know now that I should have had, a trauma therapist, because I had endured so much trauma. And so that's why it's important to find a therapist that specializes in certain things that you're going through, so your needs. So because she really did not understand, and that can re-traumatize somebody. But luckily, I ended up getting connected through another student, and I found it's called Love Speaks Out. Love Speaks Out Speakers Bureau for survivors of domestic violence. And so doing advocacy work and awareness work related to domestic violence really gave me my voice back. And it really helped empower me so I could shed light on what I went through and be able to like let other people know, like, you can get out and you can survive, because there's people who don't make it out.
Yes.
And that, to hear the different stories of people who have been killed due to domestic violence, it's heartbreaking when it's something that can be prevented.
Totally.
So having the right support system is very important. But for me at that time, the Love Speaks Out Speakers Bureau gave me that empowerment that I needed. I didn't necessarily have friends or family to rely on that at that time, because I was so isolated and was trying to keep the abuse a secret that I was embarrassed or ashamed to even seek help from family at that time.
I am proud that you're no longer feeling that way, and you're able to tell your story and be able to tell it so well and so articulated. So that's wonderful. All right, next question. How did your ethnicity and cultural background influence the way you communicated your need for help? Did you feel pressure to keep the situation within the home? And how did that affect your ability to seek assistance?
So I'm Latina, and within our culture, this is something that is not necessarily talked about. And cultural wise, it's something that you're taught to just kind of like keep it at home, like everything stays at home, just kind of like shove it under the rug. We don't talk about it, just keep it moving. And our culture can be considered machista. And so it's just going back to what I had mentioned before, it can become your norm. And so like speaking up about it is not necessarily something that is done. And so, but for me, I grew up here in the state, in North Carolina. So I'm adapted to like the American culture, but then, I have like my roots. But for me, I would say that like just being empowered by that love speaks out. I was like, you know what? I do have to get a restraining order. I do need to follow these. I do have to follow these steps so I don't fall back into this cycle. But I will say that for a lot of women, because my background is in social work, so I work with the Latino community, and the women who are in domestic violence situations, they do face specific barriers when it comes to this because of the language barrier, because of their legal status. They're scared to even go seek help because they're like, okay, if I call the police or I make this report, will this affect me because of my immigration status? And will I be, get in trouble or deported and then not be able to be with my kids anymore? So many different barriers that they may face, like cultural wise, besides what I mentioned, that was just something we don't necessarily talk about.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. In what ways have you managed to transform your experience of tragedy into a story of triumph and resilience?
So having this voice that was like shut off for like so long, like I now have found that being able to share my story, it has helped me through my healing process. And we all have a voice, we all have a story, and through that I realized like, wow, I really want to empower women to become the best versions of themselves. So many different points that got me to starting Despierta, which is a nonprofit that I founded in 2020. And so we help shed light on breaking that mental health stigma and breaking that domestic violence within the Latino community. So we do a lot of advocacy and education in regards to these different topics, in hopes that the women and the youth that we work with can find their voice. We all have a voice, we all have a story, and be able to break through this generational trauma that affects us.
That's wonderful that you were able to turn that into this.
Yes,
congratulations.
And Despierta means rise up. And so for me, it's very important that we need to rise up and become the best versions of ourselves.
I love that.
Thank you.
What message would you like to share with other survivors of domestic violence, particularly those from the Latin and Hispanic communities?
I want to tell my community that don't be afraid to seek help. You're not alone. You are not the only person going through this. There are other people who have been through this, who have survived this. Don't be afraid to seek that help. There is help out there. Despierta helps. And there are other organizations as well that are able to understand like the cultural differences. And so don't let that fear of maybe possible immigration status or the language barriers hold you back from seeking the help you need, because this affects us heavily. And also, if you have children, it affects your children. And so we have to break that cycle, and it's up to you to want to break that cycle.
Agreed. So before I read this next question, I have to give a disclaimer. So we understand and respect that domestic violence affects individuals of all races and backgrounds, and every survivor's story is important. Our intention is not to diminish any experiences, but to highlight the broader spectrum of those affected. How does the predominant portrayal of domestic violence survivors as Caucasian females impact the experiences of people of color and other ethnic groups in being taken seriously? What steps do you think can be taken to help change this narrative and ensure more inclusive support and representation?
Well, I feel that when there is not enough representation, you, in a sense, feel invisible. And so when you feel invisible and you feel like, there's no representation, like you're less likely to seek services, or you may feel a sense of judgment or shame when it comes to accessing services. So as I mentioned previously, I grew up in Gastonia, North Carolina, small town. When I was going through this relationship, that was 11 years ago. And so I know that the Latino population is growing a lot, but at that time, very small community. And so even when going to access services, you know, they're as far as like, I would say representation and maybe having someone who can sympathize with what you're going through. I didn't experience that. And so that was really tough when seeking services. And I feel like it's so important because this is a hard step to take when you're going to go seek a restraining order or receive some sort of support services. And so it's very important for someone going through this to feel validated. And so when you don't have that, or you don't have necessarily the staff that is equipped, like culturally competent to deal with certain communities, that's tough. And that can deter someone from seeking services.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
Is there anything that we didn't cover or anything not stated that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Yes, there are a few things that I would like to mention. Domestic violence is often, like, when people think of domestic violence, they think of like the physical abuse. But the physical is not just physical abuse. There's verbal, emotional, financial, sexual, so many different categories that fall into domestic violence. And so I wanted to shed light on that because I don't want whoever's hearing this, I don't want them to think that it's just physical abuse, because those internal wounds, oh, they cut deep. Like the scars, the bruises, they're gone. You don't see them on me anymore. But those internal wounds, they live with you forever. And I always say that, your healing process is a journey. It's not a destination. And I, have been diagnosed with complex PTSD. And so there are certain triggers for me. So that has a lot to do, with like those internal wounds that I experience. And when it's related to sexual abuse, I didn't know this until now that I was out of the relationship, that there were times that I was forced to have sex. I was forced to have sex even after, he had just beat me. He just beat me really bad and still forcing me to have sex, even though I'm crying. And I didn't know that that's considered rape. That is considered rape. And even if you are married, you're in a relationship, you are not obligated to have any sort of sexual intercourse if you do not give consent. Even if you don't verbally say no, but body wise, I'm crying, I'm showing that I don't feel comfortable, and someone forces you, that is, that was considered rape. As far as financial, trying to control, how I spend my money, my hardworking money, controlling that is financial abuse. So I wanted to highlight that, as well as that it's very important for us to take time to heal. If we don't take the time to heal, we could possibly end up back in that same cycle in another relationship. And I will say that happened to me. It wasn't necessarily the physical, but it was more like the emotional and mental abuse. But luckily, I finally found an amazing trauma therapist. So she really helped me through my journey of healing. But if we don't take that time, if we just like shove it under the rug, we just mask those feelings and we don't get to the root of it. And for me, it was like getting to the root of, my family issues that will end up in different cycles, or will just kind of avoid it. And that's not healthy. So that's why I wanted to highlight that, as well as the importance of realizing that you can't change anyone but yourself. So I know that, I just have this nurturing, caretaking, personality, and I just want to be able to like take care of people. I mean, of course, my background is in social work, so obviously I like helping people, but you can't help anyone that doesn't want it more than themselves. Like if they don't want to change. Yes. And for my abuser, I know that he faced a lot of trauma himself. And so oftentimes I'm like, well, maybe I can help change him. Maybe I can help him see the light so he won't do this to me anymore. But no, it would take him wanting to really want to have that change in his life and reach a level of self-awareness for there to be any change.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. I think a lot of us in relationships have what we call the superhero complex,
Yes.
where we want to drop in, save people, but we can't save people that don't want to save themselves.
Nope, we can't.
So thank you so much for your time today. A big thank you to Juliana Lozano. I know that this isn't always easy to go back to a place where you have to retell your story. And for that and taking your time out today and time away from your babies, I want to say thank you so much for participating in this. It really, really means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for starting this project. I know this is the first of many interviews.
First of many.
So I'm so proud of you as well, because I know you are a survivor of domestic violence.
I am.
So thank you so much for giving, survivors as myself a voice.
So our final thoughts. As we wrap up this powerful and emotional journey, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this project possible. First, a huge thank you to James, CEO of Goofy Entertainment, who is our talented videographer, for capturing these moments and our important stories with such care and professionalism. A special thank you to Simone of the Brit Stylez and Murphy of Murphy's Cuts for the incredible work that you did on my hair and my face. Shout out to them. A special thank you to Tomeka, LeSane of Level Up Hair Salon for your important makeup and hair skills, making our survivor feel pampered and valued. To everyone who tuned in to watch this, thank you for your time and attention. Your support in sharing and acknowledging these stories is vital in our mission to change the narrative and provide inclusive support for all survivors of domestic violence. Together, we can make a difference. Again, my name is Galen J. Burnside, the CEO of Dope Attire to Inspire, LLC. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.